Welcome back to another episode of Rap Drinks. I'm your host, Bert. I'm here with Stefan and our guests, Natalie and Simon Cleveland. Natalie's an artist and former producer. Today she works for a nonprofit advocating for diverse crew behind the camera. Simon has a varied career, special effects designer, lighting designer, and a pyro that doesn't want to be a pyro. Yeah. Together, this lovely couple has also collaborated on music videos, visual performances, and we're going to pick their brains how they got started in the industry and what it's like working together as a couple. So, cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to the pod. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Bert's so anti this stuff, but I'm going to keep it because there's definitely some really good questions to pull from this. But I think Bert's actually just said it right there. Let's just start off with how it is working together on set and what that dynamic's like for a couple.
Do you want to start?
Sure.
So polite.
So polite, yeah. Yeah, I guess it definitely comes with its level of challenges because you're home with this person, so you're always trying to figure out what that balance of striking, a working relationship versus, non-working relationship. But I think there's that level of honesty that happens in a creative level that we just get to experiment, and there's no the trust level is just 100% there, where there's no scariness of failing or doing something wrong. You just have this immediate, thing. But I think we've always kind of also struggled with this level of how are we doing our creative process and also paying our bills, doing our day jobs, coming home and doing the real weird shit we want to do when we get home. Because a lot of times we're doing jobs for corporations on our day jobs. I think you also take a lot out of that experience as well. And you take those experiences of being on a job and what you want to see and the relationships you want to see when you're doing your own projects. What are those relationships like on set? What's that transparency level, collaboration level? How comfortable are people there? Obviously, when you're doing passion projects, people aren't getting paid that same level too. So you want to make sure that they feel as comfortable as possible while they're doing that sort of maybe favor gig for you for the sake of making weird shit. Yeah. So, I mean, we've done a variety of things, passion projects together. And we've also had our own separate careers as well. So that's also, we bring all that sort of experience together when we do stuff together.
That's awesome. And you're not working directly in the same departments either. You guys are pretty
different. Yeah, very different level of stuff. Although when we do our weird art stuff together, our visual effects.
We're definitely a team. We're both doing the same things.
Yeah.
And we almost don't even talk to each other when we're in the flow. We just react to each other's art and keep working together.
Yeah. Cool. We do a lot of the same stuff during the psychedelic art that we do, but we have different levels of art expertise. So
and we do have our own focuses.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can get more into that because we do. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, let Simon kind of get into how that feels for him.
Well, I think something that's been really helpful for both our personal relationship as well as our professional careers is we're both fiercely independent. We don't have to be with each other all the time. Mm-hmm. In fact, it took until the pandemic shut down for us to really have dinner together every day.
I think the industry kind of does that to you by itself anyway.
That was a total lifestyle change. Prior to that, we realized that we really were never eating dinner. I was working at an agency in production and then post-production. Everything was takeout and, we'll have dinner for everybody tonight.
Catering.
Yeah, catering.
Catering.
Come by the office. We have dinner for you.
Yeah,
that's
taking
the dinner
home
together.
Food. And it was you'd come home commuting. We live deep in Brooklyn. So obviously we'd come home and the last thing we want to do is cook a meal or even sometimes even talk to each other.
Right.
But it's also really nice, even if we don't work in the same departments, to have a partner who somewhat understands the business, somewhat understands what we do, what I'm doing, the problems I have, the clients that I hate, because they're probably the same clients that she hates.
So I'm definitely curious, how's the dynamic? What boundaries do you put up for each other to have a healthy relationship in the office, in the workspace, and then at home too, right? Because some people, even though you're independent, there's some people that are really codependent. And I think certain boundaries need to be set so that you can be able to have the best of both worlds, right?
That was a great follow-up.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because we both work really differently also. Yeah. Simon is, I like to think of him as kind of a mad scientist a lot of times. And he works out a lot of problems in his brain where, I will think I'm having a full conversation, but in reality, he's not paying any attention to me at all. He's literally trying to figure out how to build a machine in his brain and is kind of going through those motions. So I'm very respectful of that process, although there's definitely times where we have to kind of call each other out on the level of like work-life balance. Like, I've just noticed that you've been like, you got to turn it off. Let's watch something really stupid so you can like at least go to bed without having this in your brain. But I know you're going to probably have a sleepless night and you're trying to like literally work through this problem. So I think it's just like kind of calling each other out and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, because in the past we've both had like transparency, like health issues from our working the way that we were. Like, you know, I was working 100 hours a week, eating only takeout. That had a real effect on my body, my physical self. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was not prioritizing going to like doctor's appointments because I had a deadline to meet. And when you're on staff, because I was on staff at an agency, advertising agency, on the production department for like 10 years. So that's 10 years of just constant delivery dates that you're trying to meet and going to shoots. And you're also, when you wrap that shoot, you're literally the next day going to an editorial to look at it and an edit, because that's the kind of deadlines that we were working towards. So, you know, I think it's just figuring that out. And then the reality is at that time too, I maybe didn't want to do that corporate job or do those things. So I was coming home and we'd work on stuff together. So I think, you know, I think there's this sort of weird balance that you have where you're just constantly striving to do more creative things because it's like literally in your body. You don't know how to not be an artist or make things or feel creative. But then there's also like, I got to turn the shit off and like zone out and really take care of myself, take care of my community, take care of my partner, you know?
Yeah, it took us some time to figure it out.
Yeah,
for
we
sure.
still figure that out.
I mean, earlier in our relationship, I was traveling all the time.
Yeah.
There was a period in my career where I would, in an average year, I would be away for 15 to 20 weeks. Wow. Not continuously, but that's a lot of time to be away from home. And then when I was home, I didn't want to do anything because I had just come off of 2 weeks working in the desert.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's such a dynamic of balance that you guys have to work on. And communication, I'm sure, is super important.
Yeah.
For that.
And you don't want to be like, I don't want to be that like nagging partner where you're like, when are you coming home? Well, he would always be like, when are you coming home? Do we like before when I was doing that crazy staff job for all those years, like dinner was just never, I would break plans all the time. I felt like the worst friend, worst person. Like it was really hard to make commitments because there was no way for me to know when I'd come into work what kind of emergency would blow up. Or like, it's funny because like now I work on a completely different spectrum and I have a 4-day work week and it's like set times. I have Fridays off and I specifically asked for Fridays off when I started because I knew every single Friday I would find out if I had to work that weekend. And no fail, it would be like 3:00, some sort of meeting would be urgent put on my schedule. Something would have to get revised or something happened. And I'd have to work through the weekend. So I knew when I changed careers and I wanted to do something different, I knew I had to set those boundaries. So
no one can trap me anymore.
Hell no. I mean, I still, you know, like, you know, if they need me to work on a Friday, I'll definitely work. But it's definitely a different vibe now. I mean, I'm still working on the production world, but in the nonprofit sector. So it's rare that there's like a nonprofit emergency, but you know, it's not the same sort of level, but it's definitely still, you have that sense of urgency and all those kind of things happening. But yeah, that was one of those things I had to fight for myself because I knew, you know, 20 years in the business, I needed a break.
Yeah. So when you did this career change to work in like the nonprofit I'm going to make sure I say this right, advocating for unrepresented creators, like, let's talk a little bit about why you got into that. And that falls into the job you did for 10 years.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And let's talk a little bit about that dynamic and what you learned from that experience and why you got out of it.
For sure. I mean, you know, I came up in production. I'm a production kid. Like, you know, growing up in LA was my very first production jobs. I grew up not having any production experience, jumping in, being an assistant to a head of production with literally my responsibilities were, you know, filling time cards out, booking DPs. I didn't know any of what this stuff meant or what like stages were. So I would literally just like go into the vault every night and take home like a stack of DP reels and, you know, set designer reels and do study. But, you know, it was...
At what time period was this?
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s. So it was like heyday of like TRL and like everybody was moving to LA to be famous in like reality TV. It was awful.
Still is.
It's not as bad. It's not as bad. It's sort of petered out a little bit, but like at that time, it was definitely like peak, money was being spent. Yeah, high budget. I think high budget was definitely a thing. So I worked in the commercial department. My very first job, I got, the reason I got that job, my friend worked in the same production company and in the same department and was, the head of production was definitely a tough personality. And I was brought in because they knew that I could, be chill around him and kind of sweep it off. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience. Definitely, I don't think that people have those kind of work experiences anymore. There's HR and people are definitely have a little bit more, protection in their jobs, I would say, because this was definitely a staff job too. So the hours that I was working were insane, and the things I was put up against were,
Would you consider? Were you a PA? Like, did they call you that?
No, I was like an in-house coordinator.
Okay.
So basically, in that job, so in production world, you have, well, typically if they're doing commercials, they usually have a music video department. Commercials now they do also like social media department or documentaries, and it'll be a lot more branched out. But before then, it was definitely a lot more like. You
were doing everything.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the commercial department, so it was literally like an upstairs downstairs thing. Commercial music videos were upstairs, commercials were downstairs, and we had our set of EPs. Those EPs worked with the reps, and they were basically bidding out or like trying to get in on commercial work. So any commercial would go through a triple bid process, essentially, which I think somebody might have mentioned on your last job. Yeah. So the triple bid process. So that's what we were doing. You're basically like people would. From an agency would say, hey, a producer would call and say, hey, I have this, McDonald's job, whatever. Here's the brief. Here's a brief, storyboard. I need you to give me a treatment in 2 days, basically. And then you have you do all these calls. Back then you still do it. They have like treatment writers and treatment creators. So basically you would hire like a specialist to come through and they'd pick all these visuals for you. And back then there was not like digital media the same way. So it was literally like people like scanning books.
Want to get the tapes.
And going to like literally like having professional printout books. And you'd have to run to like FedEx, the last drop off and get all this shit out to send to, all the agencies in New York, and you'd get on a call the next morning, get the book, okay. And like that kind of stuff. I definitely was also running to like Pelco and dropping off tapes at the middle of the night and that kind of stuff. Like, people don't do that kind of stuff anymore. It's definitely, you were shooting on film, now it's a cool medium to like retro, but
But so when you were doing that job for, you said 10 years, and what made you switch over?
Okay, so yeah, I was doing, so LA, I was working production company. And then I moved to New York. Simon and I met then. I was doing some other like, I worked for a retouching company for a little while, and then the recession hit. Like, I've basically
first of three.
Yeah.
First of three that I've experienced. Yes, as in my adult career. So the and then I ended up getting a job I was way overqualified for at an advertising agency, working as an assistant to an entire department for a beauty brand. So basically they did the advertising for all the global advertising for a beauty brand, and I was the assistant for the creative team and the account team. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want that job, but it was the only job I could get at that time. And this department was something like 40 plus people. But I wanted to be I wanted to be a producer. So I basically did that job, assisted the head creative lead and the head account person, but I really started getting in on the production department stuff. So I would be like, well, I can help you put a spec sheet together. I can help with this for you.
Weasel your way in.
Weasel my way in.
Right out
and it definitely worked to my advantage because I definitely got transferred over. But of course, they didn't relinquish my other responsibilities. They just gave me more.
Yeah, you get more. It's punishment for doing a good job.
They just gave me more. Yeah. So that was that experience. And then so basically it was like a weird transfer of stuff that happened, and the business sort of shifted, and the small agency I worked for got sort of gobbled up by a larger agency, and I sort of got absorbed into their production department. But what happened during this time was weird because like I didn't have a head of production for like way too long, which meant I never got reviewed. So like I was doing this job for a really long time, and I'd be like, hi, can I get a review? And they'd be like, oh, well, let's wait for the next head of production to start. And it just kind of got to a point where I was wearing that job for just way too long. And it was, yeah, I loved it because mind you, also I was working on this huge beauty brand, but I loved it because I was never going to be the EP. That was not my goal. I'm not competitive enough. I didn't want the responsibilities. But the producing that I got to do was all the B set. So I was doing all the product shoots, all the any sort of elements. So it was we did skincare, hair color, and cosmetics. So it'd be shooting the makeup tubes, shooting, swatches of lipsticks, shooting swaths of hair. Mm-hmm. And I loved it because, he's a lighting designer. So I'd come home and ask him about the lighting for this, or we'd have conversations about it, and that would be a really cool thing because also there's literally no drama on a product shoot. At least there shouldn't be. Mind you, my shot list was stupid sometimes. I mean, I would be covering. There was one shoot we did. We were shooting with celebrity talent on Long Island in the middle of March, which, by the way, is not warm by any means.
It is not.
And it was beautiful, this glass house on the beach, and they wanted to shoot this hair shot. And I also had to shoot product on the same set, but they didn't have a stage for me. So I had to shoot swaths of hair outside with a tent around it. And it was literally extensions on a clamp. And that's how we were shooting a lot of these texture shots. But yeah, I literally had wind blowing through all the clamps. Yeah, so I had to spend so much money on that retouching of hair in that product shot. It was so stupid.
So are there a lot of times at this point in your career when you're working on producing a lot of these jobs that Simon's that resource as a lighting designer? Because at this point, a lot of the time you're a lighting designer, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that process for you.
Yeah, a lot of times I would call him or come home and be like, I'm bidding this. How should I bid this?
Yeah. Or you'd come home with a lot of, is this even possible?
Yeah.
Or I don't think this was bid well. How would you do it?
How would you do it? Yeah.
Interesting. Tell us a little bit about this parallel side that's happening for you now, right? As a lighting designer and your process during this time while she's going through all her steps as a producer.
So at that point in my career, I had a lighting design firm, which meant I was mostly working in live events, but retail spaces as well. Anything with lights. Sometimes TV shows, a lot of talk shows and newsrooms. So nothing really exciting and dramatic in that world, but just anything with lights. And that also carried me into music festivals and some really exciting stuff as well. I did a really cool installation for Smirnoff that they toured the EDM or the EDC festival circuit.
Oh, that's so cool.
We built an amazing structure. It was a trailer that unfolded when it got to the festival grounds, became what looked like a single family suburban home. White picket fence, AstroTurf lawn, and a couple of bars in the front yard. But you walk in the front door, there's a kitchen, there was a bar, there was a living room with a DJ, and there's a bedroom that was the photo booth.
Nice.
And we completely decked it out. Branded everywhere.
Yeah, it was really super.
But lots of really fun house party lighting because we just got to do it. And it became the most popular thing at this festival besides the main stages.
Yeah, because it was a secret place that the DJs would come and after their big sets, they would go to this house and they'd basically built a house party.
Yeah.
Right. Which I was it's kind of a lame idea that you're at EDC, but
right.
But I was this part is really kind of cool.
Techno lighting on my hair, on my hair samples.
Exactly. Well, I didn't get to go to that one, but I did get to go when he was doing the Bonnaroo stuff for all those years.
One of the perks was I was sometimes able to get Natalie tickets to things. So
nice.
She came to Bonnaroo with me a couple of years. That was always fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
How do you get into a job like that? How do you go into lighting designing for all these amazing different EDM
Yeah, these are
concerts?
very big shows.
They were big shows, but I wasn't on the big stages. I was always doing smaller installations, but I honestly thought those were more fun.
How did that start for you though? What was that process into?
So my training was in theater, and I eventually went on and got a master's degree in lighting design for stage and film.
That's so cool.
And then I had this degree where somebody thought I knew what I was doing, but there was a global recession and there weren't any jobs to be had. So I just started doing things. I'd pick up any show I could, and that led to all kinds of stuff. I started working for a big scenic fabricator, putting LEDs in sets, because everybody was doing that at the time, and nobody knew how to solder. Okay. So I went in and I started doing that to earn some money. And then that led to, oh, you actually know what you're doing. You know how to program these things as well. You know how to do the layouts. You know how to do the math to figure it out. We have this big installation at Bonnaroo. Can you go do that for 3 weeks? And I go to the Bonnaroo Festival and deal with this big lighting installation, while at the same time building my design portfolio, building my design clients. And a lot of it is like so much in the entertainment industry as a whole, right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Being willing to sometimes step up and do something you're not comfortable with, or other times just grinding.
I think say yes and figure it out later is a big thing that a lot of people have been.
But that's where he comes in, because people say yes and they don't know what they're doing.
So they hire somebody else to figure it out.
I think that's how Simon is eventually become like the fixer. Like, I think of him as like,
I've spent a lot of time coming in and problem solving other people's mistakes. I found a unique path for myself of I like to, and that's what brought me into special effects as well. I like to do the seemingly impossible. You have this big idea. Nobody else knows how to do it. I will find a way to do it. It might not be cheap, but I'll find a way to do it.
Do you have any stories of like situations where they call you like, Simon, I really need you, and like you've come in and figured it out?
I started working for Tiffany and Company, doing their window displays, which it's all jewelry. It's tiny, tiny, tiny little things, which required tiny, tiny, tiny little lights. Mm-hmm. So I got really good at figuring out what the market was, what is out there to do these little things. And that led to museums. There was a museum exhibit, the New York Historical Society, with a bunch of model trains. And the lighting designer they hired could not get the exhibit to work, could not get it lit, could not get it to work. So I came in, and the following year, it was an annual holiday thing. I came in the following year and said, okay, here's your budget. Here's what it's going to take, and give me 3 weeks and a team, and we'll get it up and running for you. And then that led to somebody wanted magic wands for a show that I'm not allowed to talk about.
Interesting.
But I will say magic wands. They wanted them to do everything. They wanted a little bit of pyro. They wanted UV light, bright UV light coming out of it. They wanted all these lighting effects in a wand, in a handheld stick.
Magicians, a lot of magicians.
Yeah. Magicians.
Some witches.
So I said, I think I can do that. And I assembled a team of smart people, because I don't know everything. I surround myself by smart people, which everybody should. Always surround yourself by really, really smart people, smarter than you are.
It's good advice. Good advice.
I then dove in, and I didn't know anything about electronics design. I'd done a bunch of stuff with LEDs. And I said, well, let's figure it out. And we made wirelessly controlled LEDs inside of a wand that could do just about everything. Yeah. So I'm going to get technical here, because I'm a technical lighting nerd, and I know that DMX and lighting control is becoming more commonplace now. Yeah. Each wand had a universe and a half of control channels in a little handheld device, because it did so much.
I'm trying to even think of like the receiver that would like. So did they have like a receiver on their body and a wire
all
up to
in the wand? It was all custom.
What even?
We had talked about a receiver on the body, and I said, I don't even think I need that.
Because I'm trying to think like the smallest one we have that I've used on set is like an RC2, and that's a 2-channel receiver, and it's still, it's still the size of a little box. Like that's not gonna.
I developed a custom one.
Dumb this down for somebody that is like on the other side. That I'm an assistant director. I have no idea what you're talking about receiver. Tell me a little bit more about this.
Digital lighting control. When you have a light board, a dimmer board, and you have, especially with all of these LED lights that are out there now, you can run a certain number of them off of one cable. And then wirelessly, there's usually you think about one cable's worth of fixtures, and that's 512 maximum lights on one cable. And I was using almost 1,000 wirelessly. It was a lot of information to push.
So it's like when he's talking, it's like every channel. So it's like channel 1 would be the brightness, channel 2 would be the color, channel 3 would be. So it's like,
Oh, I see.
So
Each wand had somewhere around 200 individually controlled LEDs.
it's crazy.
Plus the other stuff.
So the wand's like this big is what you're seeing. It's just a pool noodle. They're all waving.
I'm surprised you don't have a job with Apple and stuff, just like putting all this stuff into a little.
That would be too boring.
Our phones would be so small. It'd be like Zoolander.
Yeah, they'd also be like way more expensive.
Way more expensive. Nothing I do is cheap.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. I mean, but I think that was like the first job. That was before he even moved into special effects.
Yeah,
That
that's
was
what
the
brought
gateway
me
to
into special effects.
because he had to work with somebody who did the pyro,
Yeah.
Right.
who could put the pyro in the wand and give him info on the pyro. So I think that was kind of like an aha moment for you, because also before that, like LEDs were not something that his mentors were working
No.
in.
Right.
That's not a medium that, because you grew up in theater, your parents are both theater,
Nobody.
yeah.
In the TV world, I know that we used LEDs on Deal or No Deal as an accent light because they were terrible for face lighting of any kind at that point.
Yeah.
And around that same time, in the early 2000s, I'm the first person I know of to put LEDs on a stage for theater.
What?
This might get rebut.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I mean, that by all means, fucking challenge it.
Challenge.
I want to know. I want to know who did it.
What year was that?
Yeah.
Leave it in the comments.
2004.
Okay, prove it.
2004, one of the first persons to use LED on a stage.
Oh,
if you know anybody else, put it in the comments.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing because it is one of those, like you're saying, that you need to have other people around you. Like some of the gaffers that I work with now, it's it's like they know what DMX is,
Yeah.
but they have no idea what DMX is. It's like they want their programmer to be able to control that light, and when they say that, they just say, "I want you to do this."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
Can you fill in any? And it's like there's just this huge gap of like, I understand that DMX can control this. I have no idea what from you to that matter. So it's like there's these new positions that are forming all the time that are like filling in all those gaps.
It's been really amazing to watch the industry change, especially over the last 5-10 years, when technology has really made leaps and bounds. It's and now the sets are a completely different place than they were 10 years ago. Less power.
Yes.
And you can run everything off of batteries now. It's amazing. I love it.
Were we just at the LDI and we saw those generators that were super quiet?
Battery packs instead of generators.
Yeah, that's what we were actually just talking about this
just
on
like
another. Yeah.
silence, and I was like, imagine being on set where you don't hear.
We do that a lot. The only thing we found out is that some of them can't bump dollies. So you still need you need a true 20 amp circuit to bump dolly.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So when you're working on this stage and you're figuring out LEDs, like how did you figure out like what was that like? Because it wasn't even around. Like me, I was like, oh, get an LED, go to a store, buy an LED.
So I was always like trying new things, always trying new things, and I weirdly have never specialized in my career. It's like I graduated from college, I moved to LA, didn't know a soul, and said, found a job in TV. Great. I am an assistant lighting director on some TV shows, but it's freelance. That's not enough work. Oh, there's a company looking for somebody with some of my skills that does architecture. Sure, I can figure out how to do lighting for casinos. And that's where I got introduced to LEDs, was because they were in the architecture market. And I talked to my salespeople when I had a little theater show. I said, can I get a sample? Like, I can't afford to buy your stuff, but can I get a sample? And they said, sure, use it. Use it for 4 weeks and just give it back to me. And I learned, and I said, oh, that's really cool. And then when you could start doing really interesting things as LED technology improved, I said, I see this cool software out there. Can I run video on my LEDs? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did.
Cool. Yeah.
And then you can do really cool effects that you couldn't achieve on a regular dimmer board.
Right.
And I said, let's just do this on a show. I don't care that nobody else is doing it. I want to do it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
how have you guys worked on that together? Because I know there's Bert had mentioned a little bit about the mermaid parade, and like
Well, the
That's very
mermaid
different.
parade has no lighting, but
No technology in
wasn't
that.
there
Well, so
projector?
you have a projector that
Oh,
you've
that
built for
stuff.
certain things.
that was for protests.
Yes.
Yeah, that was for
Oh.
social justice purposes.
Yeah. I
Rain parade.
why not? Sure.
Also,
Yeah.
free the mermaids.
I thought
should
it
free
was
the
something
mermaids.
with projecting like from
No,
the
it
back.
is.
Oh, yeah,
it
we
is.
did.
So if
Uh-oh.
you want to talk about, I mean, like, I
That's
think
cool.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of what you do is figuring out how to
something.
get something done.
Do
So-
something that nobody's done before.
Yeah, so-
when there was no entertainment happening in 2020 and the social justice movements happening that summer, and I said, I've got a bunch of stuff and I'm not doing anything. Let me go to my warehouse. I've got a pickup truck and I've got a generator and I've got a video projector. And I just went out and started projecting messages on buildings.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple of nights. I said, I want something more portable.
Portable, because
I
we kept
want-
getting stopped.
I don't want to pick up, or I don't want to push a mag liner down the street.
Right.
I said, what can I do? LEDs, obviously, low power, or much lower power than a video projector. And so I can't do video. Maybe I can do a slide. I said, and I had some things that I had bought and never found a use for. Now you can buy a 100-watt LED from Nanlite,
Yeah.
and that's really easy, ready to go. But that didn't exist even a couple of years ago. And I had a 100-watt LED, and I found some lenses, and I built a power supply with a battery, and it was a 35 millimeter slide projector.
Yeah.
Fits in a backpack
Yeah.
and can hit the top of an 8-story building
Yeah.
with an image.
We were walking up and down the Brooklyn Bridge,
Yeah.
projecting onto buildings during protests, and it was pretty cool because it was real pocket.
And what
That's
I mean,
the real
got real
definition
hot
of running
fast,
gun.
though.
well, I mean, and like, did you run into any obstacles with that? Like, I mean,
That one, absolutely not,
Not.
because it's handheld and it could disappear real fast.
right. So I
Yeah.
guess with a truck, people are gonna be like,
With
it's
the-
that guy.
yeah.
Well, you
But
know, we were taking the crew truck out, and it had all the.
The truck I would take out had my company logo all over it.
No, super discreet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
because I liked it to take that one because it looked super profesh because we had the generator in the back of the truck and it had all the stickers because it carries.
So if you
all
wear like a yellow vest and a hard
Yeah,
hat,
we
people
looked-
think
but
that you're
then-
It had
construction
all the
workers.
fire department
fire department stickers
and
on the back
it's
of it, so we
credentialed
thought
for
that we would be
gasoline.
fine, but not so much.
We still got stopped.
Yeah,
every
we still
once in a
got
while.
Well, that's what I'm like. I mean, when they stopped you, do they like? Are they trying to say that you're vandalizing? Like it's
That's
light,
what they
you know?
do.
But we were like,
And I don't want to risk any of my licensing or goodwill with the city. So if you tell me to stop, I'll just stop,
yeah, we just
or I'll move on somewhere else. But there are some court cases in the past where some people have been arrested for doing the same thing, and they won their case and got a payout from the city
Wow.
because there was no actual vandalism.
Yeah.
yeah. I think
It's
the thing
just
we were
light.
more like we were running a generator on the street,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I
That's
think
more
that
of
was
an
more
issue.
of the issue.
It's a food truck.
Yeah, I think you should just know what your rights are before you go out on the street too. So we just knew like if someone stopped us, we would just be like, "All right, thanks. We're just gonna drive to the next spot."
Yeah.
And kind of follow where people were marching. Also,
Granted, I didn't get permits or
Yeah.
permissions or any of
No,
that,
we
but
just asked for permission later.
when you have no budget, why are you going to get a permit?
Oh yeah, we've been on those shoots too. When we were through Times Square, or driving through,
Oh, yeah.
through Soho with the back of the pass van, our friend running behind it.
Just opening with
What's
the,
this?
open the back
Tell
doors.
us, tell us about this.
Oh, this was the Chapo video, actually.
Yeah,
didn't
this
light
was,
it.
This was one that
Simon
we.
made a space costume.
Yeah,
Oh, I've seen
our
this one.
friends band, we did a ton of music videos for them, and we've been involved with them creatively since the beginning.
Yeah.
But there's one video that we were both involved with. You produced it.
Yeah, I got
think-
pulled in like so last minute, and Simon we didn't direct it. Actually, shout out to Ghost Cow because they're fucking awesome. They directed it.
Yeah, they directed it, but I did some wardrobe work for it.
Yeah.
Wardrobe.
Wardrobe.
I modified a spacesuit. We bought a real Russian surplus spacesuit on eBay.
Cosmonaut.
On
Yes.
eBay? Like,
Yeah.
I would never I
You
never
can
would have
find
thought
them on
of
eBay.
eBay's great for costumes.
So I took it and I put my little bit of sewing knowledge to work, and I covered it in some LEDs and illuminating panels and stuff.
Inside, yeah.
And the classic inside the space helmet of some LEDs to light the face that you would never do in a real spacesuit because then you're blind.
Right.
But it's for film. You have to see the actor inside.
Yeah.
And we ran around with that on a
Yeah.
2-day shoot in the city. But my favorite part was Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah, we did it.
Times Square. He's just walking down 7th Avenue in the spacesuit,
Lit up.
middle of the street, all lit up, and nobody's paying attention
Yeah,
to him.
that's
Except
standard.
the
No one
cars. The
That's
cars were
standard.
pissed because
Yeah.
he's walking down the middle of the
He
street.
was like
But
walking in the middle of the traffic, and we were
none of
trying
the
to film
patrons
him
paying
and
attention.
like block people. But then at one point, it got a little weird when we got to like the TKTS area, and people were like, but yeah, but during the day we were out in the pass van shooting. He was running behind the van in the middle of Soho, and yeah, it was like that kind of stuff. You just do it because it's New York.
Typical New York. Yeah, nobody's paying attention.
No one
Everyone's-
cares.
no one cares.
Everyone's out there trying to do a hustle and shoot something.
What did Chris say? It's a student film?
Yeah.
Student
Just,
film.
just say it's a student
it's a
film.
student film.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, I was more worried because I was producing, and I'm not like these are very low paid PAs in the back of a van.
Right. Yeah.
Like with the doors
We
swinging.
probably
open.
didn't have insurance.
We definitely.
But
I definitely didn't have insurance.
that's part of you're advocating for those people that are put into those positions.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yes, so yeah, that's 100% part of that, and I fight for all sorts of things, like things inequalities that I definitely saw through my process of being a producer and not having the language or the knowledge of how to deal with that, or thinking like that's above my pay scale of having the understanding of how to conquer some of the issues that I'd seen. I will say like, yeah, working on, a beauty brand for 10 years and counting on my hand like how many people of color or women that were hired during that time is definitely very eye-opening and not right. And now I think we definitely are still fighting for a lot of those same things, for sure. But yeah, I'll shout out my nonprofit. I work for a nonprofit called Free the Work. We advocate for underrepresented creators behind the camera. It was started by director Alma Harrell at the time. She actually started it in 2016, believe it or not, right before all the Me Too stuff happening.
Yeah.
And it was her kind of coming through a lived experience because she came from working in like music video, doc, short film world and breaking out into advertising. Well, she did like most people do. She got a rep, landed on a roster and thought like, oh, I've made it. I'm going to get some gigs. Literally not getting any gigs and noticing all of her male counterparts on that roster were booking jobs left and right, and her looking and being like, what's the deal? Well, finally, she had a success story and booked a job. Someone took a chance on her, but I think she just realized like in that process, like there's a lot of injustices in this. The process is it's faulted, like how do we fix this? So she came up with a pledge. It was like a simple pledge of during the triple bid process, include at least one female director. Mm-hmm. Don't give them the job. Just include them in that bidding process.
Give them a chance.
Just give them a chance. So that was the basis of how it started in 2016. And then the second part of that was, all right, well, Catherine Bigelow, she's probably booked on another job and she's probably the one director you knew how to call. So how do we get more people behind this? So she started a database too. So it's like a database full of thousands of female directors. And that's really, you have to basically, when you're in this process, what I've learned is you're going to hit roadblocks every step of the way because people number one, I realized as a producer, like, you're hitting deadlines. You're used to the way things were. You don't want to change the system. Even though when you're on set, I'm pretty sure everybody's just complaining about their jobs the whole time.
That's where Rap Drink started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like you're complaining in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Why not take that complaints and turn it into actual change? And that's part of what we do. So we basically, work with the brands, agencies, production companies to implement, simple, actionable changes. So that's really evolved since 2016. So, we're now in 2023. We have really evolved from, just female identifying talent to all underrepresented creators. So that's everybody from the queer community to just people with disabilities, anybody that identifies as a female, people of color, literally everybody.
Yeah.
And are you reaching out to brands? Like, how is that connection happening for them?
Obviously after, the George Floyd uprising, there was like a big push in DE&I and people wanting to, like, employees were literally demanding it. When you demand something, the culture changes faster than policy. The culture was demanding a change. So the brands, when somebody like Coca-Cola makes a commercial, they're not upset with the advertising agency or the production company. They're going back to the brands. So all of these brands have to, not that it's performative, but they do need to make a change in their culture because they also have in-house employees, they have production employees, they hire other vendors. So there already is a lot of that stuff that's like sort of built in.
Yeah.
And what I've learned, and I also already knew this kind of like process of what it went through, like procurement and like people overseeing bids, and like there's a lot of systematic stuff that's involved in this process. But there's also little things that I didn't really understand at that point too. So like there's a lot of spending that's involved from the brand perspective. So they'll have what we refer to as like tier 1 and tier 2 spending. So tier 1 is often, I might mix up the different tiers, but tier 1 for my, remember, is usually like associated with a minority owned business. And then tier 2 would be on a creator level. Well, mind you, minority-owned business, there's so many different layers to that process of actually obtaining a minority-owned business certification.
Right. And
specifically in production, it's even more, so in order to obtain a minority-owned federal certification, like say if you're gay, you have to actually have people vouch for you that that's how you identify. You have to either be married. Well, a lot of people don't want to be married. Right. That's on them. Or if they're from certain countries that have conflict. So a lot of like North African, Middle Eastern countries, they can't even obtain a federal certification because they're basically blacklisted. So what we did is we actually created a badging system for that program so they might not be federally recognized, but at least it's like a stepping stone so we can say, hey, brands, production companies, here's a bunch of vendors that are specifically geared towards production.
That's what I was going to ask is if are these brands coming to you and basically earning a stamp that says like they're
on our site and they can say, hey, we support Free the Work because we are actually implementing change. Because I think they come to us or we go to them. We've been around since we've been around since 2016 and so much has evolved and changed during that time, and we actually meet the needs of the community. And I think that's really important too, because a lot of times brands don't know what to do.
Who is the one that's coming? Is it the brand or is it the agency or it totally depends on the project?
They're coming to, it's not just one project.
Yeah.
It should never just be one project. It shouldn't just be a hot topic project either.
Right.
It's and I think that's what we're coming to the table with is like, you can't just be willy-nilly picking whatever sort of hot topic comes for your community. You have to be aware all the time and include everybody because, it's like, right. I think that's where the DE&I stuff, people are kind of burnt out by it because they just look at it as like a black and white issue or that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's everybody. It's intersectional. It involves everybody. We all have different ways that we're connecting and communicating with each other, and the stories need to be diverse and from a perspective that, like we were saying earlier, like I want to go to set and I want to see the community, it to look like the community around me.
Yeah.
I want it to be as diverse as possible because that's how I am when I walk outside my door. That's how I want that to be the same feeling when I go on set.
Right.
I want to feel comfortable. People should feel comfortable to be who they are. I've actually gotten to go on set and have conversations with crew members from a very different perspective and ask them how they feel. How do they feel on set? And they're literally like, PAs are dealing with the same shit I dealt with 15 years ago, 20
Yep.
years ago. It's really fucking sad. The pay isn't that different either. Sorry, guys. But also I'm seeing, we see people of diverse communities being put in the same roles all the time. We're only seeing certain diverse roles in places like wardrobe and makeup and not seeing it the same way in, behind the camera in a lot of cases. We see it in different ways. And I think a lot of it is people don't know those jobs exist. There's no pathways.
Mhm.
People really only know about maybe director roles or key roles and not knowing all of the other opportunities that exist beyond.
Right.
But I also, I think in 2016, what was it, like 6% of commercials were directed by women? I don't think that needle's really changed all that much. And part of what we do too is also highlight what happens in the Super Bowl every year, as opposed to like who's directing and what that demographic landscape
interesting.
actually looks
So
like.
you guys are even looking at other places and making infographics or whatever that you're not even involved in, just so you have
Just so
the
we can
numbers for
highlight
yourself.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we started, and a lot of that is like at the end of the year, people will be like, so how did we do? How diverse is our set? I'd be like, well, you have to also participate, and it's a full year process. So what we did is we actually launched an on-set survey. So it's called Invoke, and Simon's actually been on set and had to take it once. But it's more than a diversity survey because, well, number one, your self-identification belongs to you. It
I
should
might
all-
have had to do that for AMC,
possibly.
but yeah.
Possibly. It's so first of all, there's a lot of surveys out there. I will just say a lot of them kind of suck. Some of them are put out by payroll companies or the brands themselves. And to be honest, that feels really sus because you're giving your information back to a company, but what are they doing with that? And what's the action
Right.
attached to it? So number one, all of our surveys are 100% anonymized. Your identification and your shoot and your role, none of that will ever get tied back to you. So it gives you the opportunity to really give a voice, which I think is like 100% so important because we're talking about everybody like being pissy on set and complaining. You're speaking into a vacuum.
Yeah. Nothing's coming back to you to
Make that kind of change. So the kind of questions we ask are things about demographics, which are 100% so important. And it's also up to you how you want to identify and up to you if you want to change that information because there's a lot of stuff that's fluid. Your sexuality is fluid. Even your certain demographics can be fluid. Terms have changed. Things like Mina and Swana are also terms that people use to identify themselves. Like people don't really call themselves like Middle Eastern anymore. It's like Mina and Swana are new terms that people use that. Middle Eastern, North African.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. I never
Yeah.
knew that.
So it's a South African, like all that kind of stuff. It's
That's cool.
it's a cool like term.
Right.
But yeah, or for instance, I have friends. I'm a kid from the 80s. My friends would never call I have friends that are gay that will be like, don't call me queer. So that's up to them how they want. They want to identify as queer or gay. Like that's
Yeah.
for them to choose, right? But then there's other questions like what's important to you about on set. Sustainability, the environmental stuff. What is your pay rate? How far have you traveled to come to work? Are you from the state?
Oh, interesting.
I think my favorite question on that survey, well, two-parter, because not only did you ask what was your rate, you also asked, do you think it's enough?
Ooh.
That's
Bold.
a good one.
Goals.
No, but that's great. If it's anonymous, Like honestly, if someone asked me that question and it wasn't anonymous, I wouldn't answer it.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm 100% happy with what I got.
yeah.
And then if it wasn't, I'd be like, absolutely not. I should be paid more.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's like transparency that people don't know about. Like I've gone to other states to do this survey. It's been fascinating because like you're diverse, and I think that's the thing. Like number one,
New York is very different than a lot of other parts of the country.
well,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
because also I think that's what people need to know because nobody should be wagging a finger at anybody about how diverse their set is or not. Because it's also dependent on where you
Right.
are. If you're
There
shooting
might just not be.
if you're shooting in Austin versus New York, you're going to have a really different landscape of your crew versus when you're shooting in LA or Canada.
Mhm.
So like
Yeah.
I think that's also important to know, and also to me, it shouldn't be production's responsibility to track diversity. It should be their responsibility to do the cool shit that they do and make creative stuff.
Right.
Go to set.
Sometimes
be a
it's
producer.
sometimes they like it's also like if you hire the head of a department, they also aren't they're not going and then hiring every single person under that. So it's like sometimes it's on the head of different places to then like, you know, it's like certain crews are definitely more diverse than other crews, like even in the same area, you know, it's just because.
But that data doesn't exist. We literally don't know. You could say all you want, and the unions, I don't think that there's actually a lot of data on the demographics of the unions, at least that's not shared. So, you know, I think it's definitely, it's been an experience going to set and having the responses from people, and a lot of it is so positive. I can't tell you the amount of positive responses I've had with the surveys, because we're there as independent entities. We're being very transparent about how their information is being used. We're using it in a way to create pathways and create solutions for production. So I will say, so one of the brands bought in on like, I think we were there for, I wasn't on the shoot, but it was something like a 2-week span, and they shot something like, it was a different shoot each day. They were doing a lot of print and media. And coming out of that big selection of shoots that they had done, they saw that the pay terms were really high. I want to say it was like over net 90, which is kind of crazy. And that was the overwhelming response that they had about like the notes. Yeah. And so the brand actually came back at the end and said, you know what, coming out of this, we really want to, you know, they actually changed their pay terms to something a lot more realistic. Cool. And not only that, we've been working with them on stuff about treatment process and, you know, leveling the playing field for triple bidding. And so we've actually been working on with them creating like almost like brand guidelines. So you have like, this is what's expected of you when you come on your shoot. This is the kind of information we're looking for in your treatment. And so basically it gives people who might not have had experience work, because, you know, if you're working on a triple bid, there's always that one favorite who's done 100 jobs with the client. And then you have the 2 other folks that maybe they've done 1 or 2. And then there's like the dark horse, you know, who's never done it. And that gives them a less playing field to turn around a treatment in time. They're probably going to turn it in last. They're going to have questions about the
How
bid.
do they actually choose who the 3 people are? Like, is that like, is it literally just like the agency is like, we know we like this person, but then here's 2 resumes?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So there's usually the favorite. There's always a favorite.
Yeah.
And it's usually the person that has probably worked with the brand before, or somebody that, you know, there's a term that we hear a lot is A-list. So it's usually like, give me a list of all the A-list folks that have literally done this same exact thing before. Okay. So it's not necessarily a creative thing sometimes it's
a who you know thing.
It's a who you know. A lot of advertising is very much about the name.
Okay.
Is
it always 3? Like sometimes are there more than like that's
bidding is a triple bid.
Yeah.
And that is something that's actually instituted through procurement usually. Okay. They're the ones who like oversee the bids and sort of follow this process, and a lot of it is based on budgets. It's not based on anything other than budgetary, although now I will say that a lot of procurement and that process has now been used in a DE&I standpoint. So it's usually a way to include other folks.
Wait, I'm sorry, what's a DEI?
DE&I, it's diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with all these surveys you take, is there a database that like shows which brands are following these guidelines or helping out? Because I know the way I like to think about it is in New York, like if you're there's always a place where a renter, where now there's becoming this database where renters in New York can go, oh, this is a bad landlord.
Yeah.
Right. So is there like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't sign a contract with this brand to work for them on this shoot.
So I would say it's up to them how they want to share. We have silent partners who don't share, and they do a lot on the back end, which I'm like, why don't you just promote this? Because I think people would actually really appreciate it, because when we're on set on their behalf and they find out that we're there on behalf of the brand, they're actually like, oh, this brand actually cares about doing this the right way. And you actually see that sort of light bulb like, oh, that's actually not so bad. Versus, you know, the other way that they could be doing this, where they don't care, number one, or if they have the other surveys and they're just literally just trying to check boxes, which is the wrong way to go about it.
Are you seeing a difference of participants, like when the brand says we're doing this versus you're just coming in and like talking about it?
Yeah, I would definitely see that. We're there on behalf of the brand most of the time because it's part of their donation, essentially. Because they're giving a donation to us in sort of turnaround to get the data because they know the data is going to pull the change. And in the past, well, there's a lot of legal restrictions as to how they can obtain that data. So if they were to do those surveys, they actually can't keep that information because they are also paying you. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of, and because they have the opportunity to hire you, so if they have that information on you and know how you identify, they could say the next job, I'm not going to hire you because I know A, B, and C about you.
Oh, shit.
So there's a lot of legalities
Which isn't legal.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is not legal.
Yeah. Yeah, don't do that. But yeah, so there's like, I've learned so much about like hiring processes, but I'll get back to your brand question because I've actually done a lot of research on this about what brands do and globally how they're participating. I will tell you, if you literally go to every single brand website, you can go to their brand initiative sections on their website and it'll give you like a full breakout of literally everything that they do, and you'll probably be really surprised.
I'm like thinking now in my head though, it's like I'm sure that there's like a commercial that they filmed that they looked around and they're like, we do not want them to come to the set and put that survey out. Like we would be fucked, you know. It's like
because we're not doing it, but we're rarely giving results. So if we give results for a one shoot, it would give no identifiable information about anybody's roles. But the way we usually give the reports, it's actually a minimum, I believe, of 5 shoots. So and then when you give that shoot out, you actually still it can never tie back to any personal information to anybody. So if you had it broken out by role and you didn't have enough participants in that specific section, we actually wouldn't even share that information with you. So it would never be tied back to anybody. So we're actually giving it in a way that it's aggregated. So we're never calling out one specific production. Like I'm saying, like nobody should ever be no one should ever be pointing a finger at somebody for not doing something right. There's always an opportunity to learn something from it and correct it and do it better next time.
Are there any stories? Because like I want to know, you know, you both left technically at different points of the industry to basically become advocates for people in the industry. What led to that? What specific stories you may have of you being on a shoot or a set somewhere that you were like, you know what, there's not enough, you know, voices being heard for us advocating on us.
Yeah, why are you advocating against pyros?
Yeah, why do you hate pyros so much?
Yeah, let Simon speak a little bit.
Why did I do such a big shift? I've always done little career shifts. Like I quit theater for television, then I quit television for theater, then I quit theater for television again. And because I don't know, maybe I get bored. Mm-hmm. But really the biggest change I made was when I started doing special effects, and then I said, and I was still doing a lot of lighting. I still do some lighting. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing more of it again. I'm doing a lot for a bunch of podcast studios, actually.
Perfect.
Oh, well, speaking of which, the reason
what do you think of ours?
Bert lit everything.
No.
Bert did it off.
It was a collaborative effort.
I didn't do shit.
But really what happened was I had a company. I had a lighting design company, and in order to grow and keep thriving, you need bigger and bigger contracts. You need bigger and bigger brands to be working with. And I needed more people. I needed to just grow. I needed full-time staff, and that's expensive. And at the same time, when you're working with ABC, when you're working with some of the big brands, when you're working with the big networks, when you're working, like Nike was problematic in this way. They have lawyers. Yeah. And if you're a small business, they'll bully you. Yeah. And mostly on payment terms. Yeah. And I wanted these contracts, but they wanted to pay net $120.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Sweet.
After I submit the invoice, they won't pay me until 120 days later. But I still have to do payroll.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't do that. And I burned myself out. I just burned myself out. Working too hard, took on too much debt. And I said, I need to do something else, anything else. And I was doing some of these special effects because I had done the magic wands, and I started doing some other projects for that company. And I was even at the point where I was renting a section of their warehouse because I needed space. And I went to the partners of J&M Special Effects, and I said, listen, do you have a job? Do you have a job for me? And they said, yeah, why don't you join us?
Shake a cup.
And we had a meeting, and they did not want to pay what I felt like I could afford. But I also realized that I wouldn't be taking on as much on myself. I'd have some support.
Mhm.
And I said, let's do it.
Yeah.
And I've been there now for 5 years, I think.
Nice.
So it's a big difference, and you may feel like at the time it was a difference in pay, but it gave you more sustainability. But
Like fucking mental health too.
mental health.
Mental health.
That's what I was gonna say.
Huge.
That was a big shift.
mental health.
Huge mental health change.
More you could put yourself at
Yeah.
ease in a different way, and you have to worry about like fending for the next job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm still very active in production. I'm still very active in the bidding and quoting process, but I also can be the bad guy for somebody else that's having trouble, or I can run things up to my GM and I can say, "Hey, I'm going to be the nice guy, but can you be the bad guy for me, and we can finish this negotiation."
And then you get to go home at the end of the day and
Yeah.
not have to necessarily worry about it as much.
Yeah.
Which is a big shift.
And I still get to do really cool, weird stuff.
Yeah, they do
Which is
really
what's
cool
great.
stuff.
Tell us a little bit about that. What's
Yeah,
some of
they
the
do
weird,
cool.
cool, weird stuff you do?
3 weirdest things now.
Three weirdest things. I did a shoot. There was an insert shot for a Marvel thing with an arm rising up out of a tank of blood, and I had to custom make over 300 gallons of fake blood, and also figure out how we can have talent not having to wear scuba gear inside of a
Right.
tank, but to actually put their arm through a tank to go up.
I'm trying to remember if I know this movie.
It's
was
it's
a
from
TV
the
show.
promo from the TV show, so it was like not even part of the show.
I think it was in the show,
show?
but it was featured in
It
the
was
promo.
really
Can
cool,
we talk
though.
about the show or no?
I think so. I think so.
Disney and Marvel are some of the
Yeah.
they produce specifically not to make a good product, but so they don't get sued
Yeah.
by that product. So I'm gonna cut that off. And
no.
I can say it was Marvel.
number 2.
Number 2 weird one. This was for MTV. I don't remember which show it was for, but it's for MTV. I built some realistic looking infant baby dolls that really peed dramatically because it was about teen moms and teen dads. And so like I think before the babies are born and the dads had to change the diaper on these fake babies for some contest.
Teen Mom 3, the remomming.
So
like
I built these baby dolls that would just shoot 6 feet of pee out of them.
Well, it was apple juice, right? It was an actual.
It was just yellow water.
Yeah.
Yellow.
Oh, okay, I was gonna
Yellow
say,
water.
Just check it.
What's some
That's-
other? This
that's
one's not
intense.
so weird, but I just love to talk about it because it was a huge project and so much fun. In case you didn't know, Back to the Future is now a stage musical.
awesome.
That was one of my favorite movies as a kid. I designed and built the flaming tire tracks in the stage that go off 8 shows a week
Nice.
and violate every single fire code in existence. Yet I built a system so safe that the FDNY couldn't find a reason to say no.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah, they love him.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah, the shoot we were on together randomly right before the holidays, the fire marshal had to show up on set, and number one, I've never been on set where literally everyone was so underqualified, and Simon was probably the most qualified, like professional person on set, and he got there later to find out that they didn't have the correct permit.
They did not file the permit correctly.
Yeah.
They had a bunch of things that weren't on the permit, and they filed the permit for a bunch of things that weren't there. And
My favorite moment.
I walked in and I was like, you might get shut down.
Yeah, you're gonna get
when
shut
the
down.
inspector shows up.
Yeah, my favorite moment was literally like the fire marshal comes in, locks eyes with Simon, beelines to him, and they have like this bro handshake moment, and everybody on set is just like watching, like, oh shit, like,
And everything was okay.
everything was fine, and it
Because
was like
he trusted me.
saved the set, like he
Oh,
saved the
wow.
shoot. They
Yeah.
couldn't have done. They had like a car with. Like you can't have a hazer and a car.
It wasn't
running at
that.
the same
You
time.
can't have a car on set with a full tank of gas.
Makes sense.
But they didn't even
inside.
put the car
Yeah.
on the permit.
Yeah.
Like
Fire
I saw that
marshals,
and I knew, oh, that's going to be a problem
Yeah.
when the inspector shows up. And the inspector showed up and we talked it out. And he said, you're here. Everything's going to be okay.
Okay, so
It's-
I want to know why in the beginning of the title here we have
Reluctant.
Simon has had a varied career as special effects designer, lighting designer, and a pyro that doesn't want to be a pyro. Why
Fire's
don't you want to
scary.
be a pyro?
So most
But you
people,
make it so safe.
I know.
most people who go into special effects, they want to blow up a car.
Mhm.
That is the last thing I want to do. I love making realistic looking fake fires. I can make the most beautiful fake fire that doesn't involve fire.
Yeah, it's really nice actually.
Wait, how do you do that?
Magic.
I
Do you
have
do the
all sorts of
crumpled
magic
aluminum
tricks.
can? Is that your go-to? The spinning log.
I've done a couple of different things. I've got some that are sitting on a cruise ship right now that we
Why not?
The fact
Cruise
that
ship
you
feeders
have,
shit is hilarious.
it's like you can't pin Simon down.
No, you can't.
No.
You can't pin him down. He's got a job in Tiffany's with these little lights. He's got
That was
logs on.
You worked on
logs
that too, yeah.
You got logs on a cruise ship. Like, tell me about this fire concept. Like, I mean, you don't have to go into specific details if you
So,
don't want to, but like
the cruise ship one, you can't have real fire on a
on
cruise
cruise
ship
ship.
for obvious reasons. And
They did it once.
not even really. They don't even really like fog and haze. For obvious reasons. It's a cruise ship.
Yeah.
They're big
Yeah.
safety issues. So I built these campfires that they look a little cheesy, but they also look quite good. We built them out of real firewood logs that I shipped to New Jersey to get flame retardant put on them. And hollowed them out and put a whole bunch of LEDs in and an LED and plastic and paint bed of embers. And they just sit
Wow.
there and twinkle and flicker like a fire.
Nice.
And
incredible.
at some camping experience on a cruise ship. Cruise ships are weird.
Yes.
man, you'd have the best Etsy store. Just like, just like
Not
random
cheap.
shit.
It wouldn't be cheap.
It wouldn't
though.
be
That's
cheap,
the
but it'd be
problem.
amazing
Anything cheap.
stuff.
I've decided, I learned a long time ago, I never want to be the lowest bidder. If anything,
Yeah.
I want to be the highest bidder.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because if I get the job, great. If I lose the job, somebody else will have a job.
They get to
Yeah.
deal with it. Yeah.
You know,
But
do all
also
the
don't go
headaches.
low because that screws everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. How do you discuss in jobs like this that you don't necessarily, it's not very common? How do you figure out pricing?
Thankfully, I've done it a lot. So I've got a big back catalog of things, and it takes me a while to price something out. I'll spend a week going through spreadsheets to price something because I am going to do the research, and I'll come up with the idea before I put a price on it.
Oh.
And honestly, though, the most expensive part is always labor. Labor is
Oh.
always going to be more expensive than materials. So the big question is, how many person hours do I think it's going to take to build? And then how much sort of extra do I think I need to make sure that I stay under budget?
Yeah.
And then also I do try and figure out what the client thinks that they're willing to spend, because that's important.
Right.
Like, I don't want to give you a $30,000 product when you have a $3,000 budget. But if I know you have a $3,000 budget, I might be able to come up with a $2,500 product.
Yeah.
Right. I see what you're saying. That's
Like-
impressive.
And a lot of producers don't like to give you that number.
Yeah.
What's
But-
that? What did Alan say? It's like whoever throws out the first number loses.
Yeah.
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 But it's like, if you give me a number, I'll work within it
Mhm.
for the most part. Otherwise, I'm going to try and give you the best thing possible because I want to see you succeed. And then if you tell me how much you want to spend.
Right.
Wow.
I feel like some of the most creative stuff happens when you're strapped for, funds or
That's true though. Like
you
our
know?
personal projects that we self-fund, we figure the weirdest shit out because we have no money.
we
and
literally
just
have
wanna
no
do
money.
it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your personal projects, because I think you had one with a projector that I thought found really cool that you used for
Yeah.
like some music videos, right?
It seems like you guys
Yeah.
like everything you've done now is very modern, and
Yeah.
then you take a step backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have always collected interesting old things.
Yeah.
And as part of that, it started with me.
Yeah, it started with
But
you because you're
I got you involved. I have always been fascinated by the the 1960s psychedelic lighting. There's a lot of pictures of it. There's not a lot of film or video of it out there, but there's pictures of, the Who at the Fillmore, the Grateful Dead, and the acid tests that were traveling around the country. So that's all really cool. And none of that was done with video. None of that was done with any post-production, really. That was all done live in the moment. And I said, I want to learn this. There's not a lot of information on how to do it. So I said, well, let's just collect a bunch of old projectors and figure some things out.
And I was game because we were already going to, rummaging in thrift shops and antique shops. So it actually gave us a lot of purpose. And really, I also grew up with my dad not owning any new cars. I always grew up with basically grew up with antiques everywhere. We both same way. So there's this appreciation for the old and the, giving it new life also.
Yeah, and it's also a great bonding
opportunity. We're always looking for ways to work together.
This is when we were still working with a lot of different musicians and other artists, and we collected some things and started learning some techniques, and then figured out we can actually do this, and we can build up a light show.
Yeah.
That's what they were called then. When you say light show now, you think of a concert.
Lasers.
Lasers and stuff. But we can do a vintage light show. And we said, let's just do it. And so our setup for the average show
is usually a long table.
It's a big table, but it is just the two of us. We have two old school classroom overhead projectors. We have two medium format slide projectors.
Which, hold on, I feel like a lot of people might not
know what this is.
TikTokers have no idea.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Oh my God, we didn't even think about that.
It's literally a light board, shines a light up through what you would put a plastic sheet, and you'd write on it, and then it comes up through a mirror and a lens. It's just a light and a lens and a mirror.
It's basically math class in the 90s. That's math class.
So we got some old medium format slide projectors. So the slides are big. These are some six.
We can tell what we do with those. So basically, you take the heat shield off of those, and you have these glass slides, and you can put
you put different paints and inks and solvents in it. And then you smash it together and you put it in the projector, and it just sort of moves.
Very psychedelic.
Oozes and pops and bubbles.
So you start with an actual slide, a slide picture that you found from somewhere, and you can only use it.
No, you can use it. You can take it out.
I buy the slide so I can get the mount.
Yeah,
I get the film.
Yeah.
And I just use the glass.
Oh, nice.
Sometimes we'll use the film and mess with it or do other things.
I've seen put drops
you can only use it once.
We've collaged film before.
So with the old school projector, we can put
a tray of fluids, and you drop inks in, kind of like a cloud chamber, but we do it live and we do it in real time. We're not doing it. We're not shooting at 120 frames per second. We're doing it live.
You're looking at it.
And it can never be replicated the same way.
There's no way for us to record. We can't record the individual elements. We'll sometimes record the screen.
When we did it, we've done quite a few shots overhead, but you don't get the same feeling. But when we've done music videos before where we've shot in a studio and we've set up a screen and we've shot on the screen.
A rear projector.
We've done a rear projector.
We did an interesting project with some musician friends of ours. We called ourselves as a group the Voyager Collective. And
nice.
So we went into a studio.
Oh yeah, this was fun.
We spent 4 hours in the studio. Natalie and I projected on the ceiling.
Yeah.
While the musicians were just all
jamming,
playing their instruments. Everything was improvisational. Yeah. We recorded the whole thing. And we released the music as a 3-album set. Nice. All improvised, all recorded in one take. And we never finished the video part of it, but we did 2 out of 3 full-length album videos.
Nice.
To go along with it.
So because we didn't have the technology, so it's funny because after we shot that, we came up with the technology, but at that time we didn't know. We didn't know
how we could also shoot it.
Yeah.
and
That's a whole
record it
nother
live.
production crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've now figured out a hybrid where we can do the analog stuff without the analog projectors.
Yeah.
So we can put some cameras overhead and we can.
Yeah.
Oh,
now
and then you
we've-
use a digital projector to record what
Yeah,
you...
so
Oh, that's
we've
cool.
done some cool stuff. Actually, I think we've always liked this idea of taking this like old school medium and putting a lot of technology because like obviously both of us are into new mediums.
Yeah.
Like you have the LED element and like he's always looking towards the future and like thinking of ways that we can like change stuff. And I'm really into like so when we're doing this, I also do a lot of Lumia. I think I have like hundreds of chandelier crystals and different crystal
Yeah,
pieces.
your
You put
photography
those in
is
front
really
of the
cool, too.
lenses
So if we're doing stuff in real time, I actually use the crystal in front of the projector so I can like manipulate the real time video or like
a
all sorts of
kaleidoscope
stuff.
kind of,
I use it almost like a spotlight in a way if we're doing stuff for like a dance performance or printing stuff off the walls. So it's definitely one of those things where you're in that space. We love to take over a space and transform it and literally take people on a trip.
Yeah.
even-
And it's so much fun to play with color and movement. And even though we're doing everything linearly in real time, we do sort of play with your sense of time.
Yeah.
too.
And like live music is a really cool medium to put that to too, because
Yeah.
it's like even that, like you can go to a show, you can see that same band play the next day. That's a different show.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they're never going to repeat their thing. So
Yeah.
stacking those two on
100%.
top of each other is like this really cool, you know, it's
Yeah.
like a compounding effect.
Yeah, and we'd love to do it with like other people too. So you know, if anybody else is interested,
If anybody wants to
yeah.
jam.
because the whole concept of it is based on collaborative stuff. So we got really lucky. So Joshua Light Show are like the origins of like they're the
There were some of the
creators-
early
the
pioneers.
We
They
got to
still
s-
perform sometimes, and we
got to
did get to see them. We
Skirt
saw them a
Balls?
couple of times. They did a show with the Scissor Sisters at the Hayden Planetarium,
That's what it was.
which
Wow.
is the first time either one of us got to see that live.
Yeah, that was
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then, but when I finally said, I want to do this deep dive, we bought tickets to see them at the Skirball Center. And a friend of mine works there and says, hey, you want to come backstage? So,
it was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I want to see
yeah.
these guys work.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, you think you could do that?
100% yes. So it was
Wow.
like probably like 15 people backstage.
His shows
Yeah.
his shows were huge.
And is it just because they have more projectors, so there's more people
More
working
people
in
doing
pairs, or-
things. And they
It's not
they
just projectors.
also
It's
have,
like literally anything that is reflective or creates
Okay.
some
They had
sort of
some
shadow
setups.
play or puppets and that kind of
some
stuff.
what they did is some of their setups, they had a bright video projector on the floor backstage pointed at the back wall instead of at the screen. It was all rear projection, so the screen was between the projectors and the audience. But somebody would then take mirrors and manipulate and bend the mirror to manipulate the image being reflected off of it
Yeah.
as it hits the screen.
cool.
Yeah, and I love that idea because it's like they're not talking to each other either. It's this like sort of like fluid motion that happens behind everybody.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like there's really no wrong way to do any of this stuff. It's really just like a feeling in a moment. And
Somebody will take over for a little bit and take the
yeah.
lead
And
and then
that's-
pass it to somebody
Yeah.
else.
So that
Somebody's
was-
got to go to the bar.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, and I think that's what we sort of love, this idea of it. Like, it actually felt like something we could do that it didn't feel like there was a sort of like pressure on us either when we do it.
And
There's no right or wrong.
brand.
There's
There's
no
no
right or-
brand
there's no
attached
brand.
to it.
Yeah.
We're not doing it to sell something.
Yeah, you're sponsored by the dye company. or
Yeah,
the-
exactly.
like
I
the-
mean,
the glue,
we
like
know
the
the person who
solvent.
we know somebody who makes dyes, and that's really cool. There,
Yeah.
you know, there is a small collective of people still doing it,
And there's other younger people
yeah,
that were not
yeah.
of the 60s doing it, which is really great to
yeah.
see.
Because I also don't want to be like just doing stuff that's like reminiscence of the '60s because that's kind of
We
boring.
want to do
Oh,
what
that's
we
the, I
do.
mean, but that's
Let's-
what you're saying. You adding the digital elements, and you know, it's like that.
And-
you do get to compound on it.
And now that we
Sure.
have learned the digital workflow, I think it was really useful for us to learn the old workflow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like
Honoring the process.
you know, and when I was in college, I learned to draw by hand before I learned to draw on the computer. And I think when film school and people learn to shoot on film before switching to digital, I think that's useful.
Mhm.
You may not ever use those old techniques again, but it's useful. In the same way, we learned the old techniques and then figured out how to do things in a new and modern way. And now we can also integrate recorded video
Yeah.
with the live video.
I was going to ask if
and
you've ever
manipulate
built like an
things.
LED panel to put under whatever
Oh
you're
yeah,
projecting.
it's pretty cool.
We've
So
done
it's
some of that.
it's actually pretty lo-fi how we do
We
it.
used we did use once a video monitor instead of a light panel. So we used a video monitor as the light source under the camera with the plate in between, and played with video feedback and
Yeah.
our other live
Nice.
stuff on top of it.
Yeah, that was really fun and weird. And
It's like when you take the camera at the store and point
Yeah.
it at the screen that
Yeah.
you're looking
Yeah.
at it, and it's just the infinite.
yeah, we were
Yeah,
just
yeah,
taking
yeah.
we were taking
But then
stuff
we
I
threw
was shooting.
mechanical filters in
Yeah.
between.
yeah, that's cool.
We
That's
were
awesome.
we'd
Yeah.
go out, or we were going out and we were taking the projector that we made, the little projector, and going out into Coney Island and projecting stuff on the walls there. So we took all of our like
Yeah.
recorded medium and we're like projecting stuff on the ocean and like taking shots
That was
of that.
that was the first time taking a projector out into the wild before any of the protest projections.
Yeah.
And it was just a little cheap,
Cheap.
battery powered
Yeah.
video projector.
were
A
just like-
projector out into the wild. I thought I never would have heard that in my life.
We were just going out at night and projecting on stuff because we're like,
Yeah.
oh, no one else is going out.
That'll make some cool Instagram content.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, see
or
who
like,
comes
what are we going
out,
to do?
or-
What is this going to look like? We didn't even know like how
Yeah.
powerful this thing would be.
It was
and
not
like,
very powerful.
no, it wasn't. We were like literally on the beach in the dark, but it looked
You do
cool.
much better with a big projector and a generator.
Yeah,
I always
yeah.
love that when you like when who's ever in charge is like, hey, point that light at the building. You're like, there's a lot of people in that
Not
building.
gonna do anything.
See, Simon, you get to work on all these really cool like projects, and you're playing with fire. How do you get there? Like, what certifications allow you to play with fire?
So there's a lot of different safety certifications out there. Every single jurisdiction is different. So like every state is different. Some cities have special requirements. So I don't know every single place, but I know my experience. I've had to have all sorts of background checks. Even before I started special effects, I would do projects at the United Nations. I would do projects with presidential campaigns. So I've had every single background check possible. So luckily, I never got caught.
Until this airs.
So that was the start of it. Before I even became an employee at the special effects company, because I was renting part of their warehouse, I had full access to their space. I had to be on their ATF permit. So I had to go through another background
ATF
check.
means
Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
Oh, okay.
So federal permit, because we manufacture, store, and sell explosives and firearms. We have the second
As
largest.
one does.
I believe we have the largest explosives magazine in New York City, and we have the second largest armory.
wow.
Who's
Which
got
is
the first?
weird to think about.
Yeah, but
Weapons
it's all
Specialist
props.
has the biggest. All of our weapons are props, but some of them are still regulated firearms. And
Wow.
we have the machine guns. We have the stuff. We also have a prehistoric stone axe because
Because props.
it's still
Why
a
not?
prop.
Yeah.
It's still a prop. It's still a weapon. It's still a special effect. So that was the beginning of it, and then I started getting licensing so that I could do things independently and not have to work under somebody else with a license. And as part of that, New York City has its own licensing separate from New York State. That's not always common. So I have done my licensing with the fire department, and it's an interesting process. They require you to start as an apprentice. So I was very much mid-career, and I first touched pyro when I was 18. This was in Colorado. I was asked to be a fire guard
Didn't we all?
for a show with pyro. This was actually professional. I was paid to touch pyro
At 18?
at 18.
Wow. How did you get searched for that?
So I was working underneath somebody with a certification.
Okay.
I was just there with the fire extinguisher. I was
Got it.
there in case of fire and to keep people from smoking next to it.
Just shoot what fire extinguisher in your face. Don't smoke.
That also meant when it came time for me to start the application process with the fire department, I could list that many years of experience, which helps.
Very nice.
But I still had to start as an apprentice.
Yeah.
In fact, a friend of mine who was a touring pyrotechnician with Ringling Brothers, he wants his New York City license. He still has to start as an apprentice.
Yeah, it's not transferable
Yeah.
to any cities.
Which is unfortunate. Through my employment under the company's licensing, we are manufacturers, we have storage, all of that stuff, and then I have an individual license. And at this point, I've moved up. I've moved up a tier. I'm not at the top tier yet. I don't have a reason to be until somebody says you have to have it. Then I might go in and take the test. But I've moved up, so I am allowed to do a certain number of things. I can set fires. I can't do big explosions. I can do a lot of stuff indoors. I can't do most of the big stuff outdoors. It's just the way that the fire department has set it up.
But like you need that pyro license even to do smoke machines now.
You do, which is it still catches people off guard. It's been on the books in New York for over 10 years now. But I will say they have started enforcing it more.
Why?
Blame Kanye West for this one. So, everybody's been to a concert, I assume, or a nightclub. Or a play. You have seen fog and haze.
Yeah.
Fog. Every DP loves haze.
Atmo.
Yeah, because it makes the lights look better.
Yeah.
So, New York City is really strict about things. Chicago as well. Those are the two jurisdictions I know the best. I know that California is a little more lax about some things. Most of the country, you can just turn on a fog machine and nobody cares. But New York City, because we're so dense, because fire is a big issue here, our buildings are old, you do have to have a permit for atmospherics. And part of that permit now requires a pyrotechnician on set. It doesn't have to be a top tier. It could be an apprentice, but they have to be on set as part of that permit, and it has to be inspected by the fire department. And it's maybe not all, but it's mostly because Kanye West had a show at Madison Square Garden with more fog and smoke that anybody should ever use. You couldn't see the stage.
I mean, a lot of things happen in Madison Square Garden. You'd like it. I feel like they must have seen it all at this point.
But he set off alarms in parts of the building that had never been set off before. And that caused the fire department to just send an army of trucks and resources. And the city said, never again.
Yeah.
Wow.
So part of this permit is actually to protect your production. So if you set off an alarm and the fire department rolls and you don't have a permit, that fine starts at $5,000.
Wow.
I believe it's per truck. So if you're in a big building or if you're in an apartment, they're going to send more trucks.
Yeah.
So it gets really expensive really fast. But if you have your permit in place and you have your permission from the fire department, even if somebody sees smoke pouring out the window and they call the fire department, and it's not a false alarm because the alarm went off, but they've been called, you don't have to pay the fine because the paperwork's in place. There's a record that it's been done safely and it's been inspected.
So, Simon, when you're talking about like all these different jobs, you're talking about tiered levels that you have for like what you need, whether they're bottom tier for pyros or top tier. Does that vary for unions versus non-union? Because you yourself are non-union.
So I'm non-union, and all of that pyrotechnician licensing, that's all dictated by the fire department. They don't care about union or non-union. They actually don't even know that much about entertainment. Most of the people in the explosives unit, which covers special effects, they come out of construction. They're the people that blast the tunnels. That's where they came from. So all of what I do is kind of new and exciting for them. And it's become a problem. Local 52, the local film and television union, they have a special effects division. So that's easy. But in Local 1, who is Broadway and stage and studios, like new studios. They have a different definition of roles. Special effects falls under props usually, but atmospherics fall under, and pyro fall under lighting, because it's the electricians that do that.
Sure.
Makes sense.
In those events.
DMX
But then,
boards.
like smoking a cigarette, lighting a candle, that's props.
Yeah.
Well, the fire department doesn't care if it's props or electrics that has the pyrotechnic permit. They just want somebody to have the permit.
Somebody needs to.
And we've run into situations where to properly staff a show to fill in the union roles, we need 2 pyrotechnicians, even though all we have is 1 cigarette and a haze machine.
Is it so one guy can't work under the other one at that point? Like you actually need the 2 licenses?
The fire department thinks that one guy can cover it all.
Yeah.
But the union has said that the division of labor, the lighting pyro can't supervise the props pyro, or the props pyro can't supervise the lighting pyro.
52 is so smart with their contracts. Everyone gets a job.
So Natalie, how does that work for you, union and non-union, when you're helping creatives and advocating for them? Does that job matter when you're out there for brands?
No, I mean it just depends on the project. I think brands are always shooting union and non-union shoots depending on the budget and where the location is. So for us, like specifically if we're doing a survey on set, it really doesn't matter, but it really matters to us because that data is even more important because we want to know what the non-union crews are actually making and what's important to them. We want to know what's important to a union shoot as well. So, and are they experiencing the same things on set? We don't know.
Right.
So like to us, like I just want to make sure that if there's a non-union shoot that everyone's being paid fairly and that, you know, their hours aren't insane, that they're on a safe set. That should be always 100%.
Yeah, it's not non-union just to take advantage of them.
100%.
It's non-union for other
a
reasons.
financial reason, most likely. It's usually money related, right?
Are you seeing that? Are you seeing in the union versus non-union? Are you seeing a big gap in pay?
Well, that's what we don't know.
You don't know yet.
I don't know. Like that's the information we really don't know. And how different is it from literally coast to coast, city to city? Are people being paid the same rates for the
And that's just
same
going to take
jobs?
more time of accumulating data.
Yeah, accumulating data, making people trust us and taking their data. Because
Are you guys national?
yeah,
Like you're,
we're
okay,
global.
Oh, okay.
We're global. Yeah, we have a global database and we've actually taken the survey. So we can be on set with the survey or we can send a link out with the call sheet and say this is, you know, but we do better when we're on set because it's always good to like explain where your information goes because
Put eyes on what's actually happening.
yeah, because like if you just got a survey in your inbox, would you do it?
I've ignored
Yeah.
I got one from a production company I worked for one day this year because our TV show got canceled and we had one day of wrap in January and they've sent me 17 emails and do not want to fill it out because A, they canceled our TV show.
Exactly.
And B, I didn't fucking work for them this year.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's all these sorts of things like instances that your experiences. So if you did take a survey, you'd probably be pretty honest, like how upset you might have been.
Yeah.
We want to know. I want to know. I don't want to get like positive surveys. I want to know the nitty gritty stuff that's big issues for productions because, you know, the reality is like we have the ears of the brands and they do care. Like, I think there's this misconception too that they don't care and that they're just like faceless brands. But the reality is like, I don't know, I've worked in this industry for so long that literally you've seen people circle back. Interns I have are colleagues of mine or could even have higher positions that I've had. I've literally had hundreds of interns in my time that I have trained and they've become directors and producers and of all sorts of skill levels. And so you just never know, but there's champions in all these places. Like people who work in the brands, a lot of them come from production and want full-time gigs. They want security. Right. So you have all these people in these positions of power who also see those injustices and, you know, they're fighting the good fight in these brands to be like, okay, well, let's include, you know, let's take a chance on talent we've never hired before. Let's take a chance on businesses that might not have federal recognition and they're minority owned. Let's reinvestigate what the bidding process is like. Maybe, I know my dream thing is like, oh, let's change the timelines of jobs because the reality is like, It's crazy. You know that, like,
if a shorter shoot means more shoots.
it means 2 days.
But we talked about this before. You know, it's like if a TV show takes 6 months,
Yeah.
you can only film 2 TV shows that year.
Yeah.
If it takes 4 months, you can shoot 3.
Yeah.
If it takes 2 months, you can shoot 6. That's more money.
Yeah.
So that's why they do this bullshit.
This condensed timelines, but also, like, I'm coming from it too, like, an advertising perspective. Like, at the beginning of the year, the brands know exactly what their deadlines are to get things to air, and it should never really be a surprise. And the bidding process usually happens like a week before a shoot's supposed to be scheduled. That's insane.
Yeah. As you're collecting this data, are you seeing any change in like what people fill out the surveys of, like work or productivity of working a 10-hour day versus a 12-hour day? Is any of that stuff being witnessed
I think the biggest discussion, what we are uncovering, is really travel times. And I think it's a bigger issue on the West Coast, to be honest. Like, people are living farther and farther outside of the city of where they're actually shooting. And you have people who are living in, like, Simi Valley coming in 2.5 hours while they're going on a 14-hour shoot day, and they have 2.5 hours
So
there.
5 unpaid hours of work.
5 unpaid. So why aren't we giving them somewhere to stay?
Right.
What's the turnaround time?
I mean,
they're not considering the travel time as their turnaround time.
In my experience, even the hotels, the safety room that they give you is 45 minutes away.
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, well, my house is an hour away.
Might as well just
I'm
go
going to
home.
do the 15 extra minutes to go see my family.
So I think there's all sorts of issues of, like, oh, that's why the question is there about, like, how far did you have to travel to get to this job? So it's like, I don't think that people are really upset about working a 12-hour day if they know that they're going to a job that they're going to work the 12 hours. I think what we get upset about is when, oh, okay, well, we're going into meal penalties. Everyone should be super excited they're making more money. No,
we just want to eat.
Yeah,
we just want to eat and go home.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it when the call sheet has like an estimated wrap time, and you get to look at that, and then you get to look at your clock, and you're like, we are 4 hours past when you said.
Yeah.
Like, don't give me the hope if you're not going to give me the result. Like,
Yeah, I think that's more stuff that I think is I think there's that sort of transparency level too. Like, you should know of all levels of your job what you're going into. I think a lot of times you might show up to a gig and literally have no information about what your job, and like, you might be like, all right, well, here's required to wear this outfit. You know, you might be outdoors in the elements. You know, like, that's basically some of the info that you get. That's it.
Oh, when I was working out here a lot, it was a photo of the portion of the call sheet that said the address, and then the text with the time I needed to be there.
Yeah.
Cool.
I
guess I'll see you tomorrow.
Are you guys noticing a change of, like, you know, you guys personally on your own stuff, you're playing with like these old school styles, right? But you're also very much new school and looking forward at how the tech changes. What's the collab between the two, and like, what do you see the future being?
I think you can always learn from what has been done before you. And I think you should embrace that. And I think as much as you can learn how things have been done, that'll help you figure out your own technique and how to move forward in the future. And I love technology. I absolutely love modern things. I also love old things, both in my personal and my professional life. And I know that I'm never like, sometimes that thing doesn't really exist anymore, but I know of it and I've used it 20 years ago. And I think, well, maybe I can just make a new one. And then you might wow somebody because they don't have that experience from 20 years ago. And think, oh, as simple as a spinning piece of ripple glass, that's cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I love technology. I love old and new. I think that you need to appreciate the past to invest in the future. I think knowing the basics is 100% important. Like, I think a lot of that stuff has a resurgence, in my opinion. Like, you definitely, like we were just talking about, people shooting on 8mm or film on film. You know, it's a novelty kind of, but it's not practical. It's not a practical element, but it's definitely, I think you're seeing, like, for instance, I love photography, and I got into shooting film actually when I was a casting PA, and I used to do I used to be a casting PA and have like literally stacks and stacks and stacks of Polaroid film, and I would obviously
Polaroids.
For your headshots.
for headshots, and that's how I got into learning about photography and really enjoying this like instant moment where you can't change it.
Yeah, you guys were talking too about doing a lot of like in-camera effects for like when you're shooting stuff like that too. So
Yeah.
is it like is there kind of like, obviously I think a lot of people think about it like, let's capture it the most high quality and let's edit it later and then we can turn it into what we want it to look like. But there's also this certain kind of like instant gratification of being able to see it right then and there and know that you can't replicate it. And this is like a one-timer.
I love the practical effects, and I love it's the instant gratification. It's that instant rush of dopamine. It's like, that was fucking awesome.
So awesome.
But also in speaking with a lot of post people, like, if I can, this is coming back to special effects, but if I can give them a small explosion, that then gives them something to work from to create the epic giant explosion.
Yeah,
and they don't have to build the whole thing from scratch.
Yeah.
They love that.
And you know what it'll look like in that environment. Like,
yeah, and it'll look more realistic because it's coming from a real thing. So, like, I think of like people are really scared of AI and like all these things. I see it as like, I mean, yes, there needs to be regulation and it should have happened already, but I see it as like a creative tool.
It
like,
is a tool.
It's a tool.
Like, people said the same thing about photography, and yet we've been able to turn that into an art form.
Literally said that about computers.
Sampling is not just stealing. That is
it's art.
Creating something new.
Yeah.
I think it's also like the telephone. Whenever that was first coming around, I saw an very old newspaper where they had these like drawings of people in telephone wires. Like, we're all gonna die from electricity.
Exactly.
And it's such a cool.
Yeah, I think the AI it can be a little scary, but I think it brings a whole other medium, and it's funny because like I think a lot of the AI artwork I've been seeing is so much of a throwback. Like so much of it looks like old photography or like 1960s retrofuturism, which is my favorite. I love retrofuture.
When they had hope for the future.
Yes.
It's not all dystopian.
It's my favorite aesthetic. It's like one of my favorite aesthetics. And that's, funny enough, one of the most used things, like aesthetics I'm seeing on AI, where they're like creating these like futuristic kind of worlds. And I don't know, I'm embracing it and I'm not going to be super scared of it, but I'm being very aware of it. I'm talking to my mom about it, what to recognize, because I think that's also important is like information about what you see and what's real and what's not, and how to, because deep fake it's real.
It's very real. I mean, I told my mom about how they're now having someone like she can possibly get a call from me saying, "Mom, I'm lost. I need some money. Please send me money." But it's not actually me. It's my voice though.
Yeah.
So like making them aware of like, hey, just hang up and call me and make sure it's actually me.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on too that we have to prepare.
Have a safe
I thought
word.
Charlie's Angels stopped that, and wasn't that one of their movies?
Oh, maybe. But I do think like as far
None
as
of these
like,
ideas are new.
Yeah. I do think like AI, as far as like production, I think yet to be seen how that affects us, because like it's not going to affect what's happening live on set, but it's going to affect things like, I think, the editorial process. It's going to affect VFX in post-production. It's definitely going to affect like you were just talking about versionings and like how you can press a button and a computer will like edit, but that's not a real person. People are always going to want a real editor.
And I think like now we're seeing a lot of VFX houses are unionizing now too, and it's like they're trying to get ahead of that.
I think that's a great thing.
It's a great thing. They should have been unionized so long ago, and they've been abused for. I mean, the fix it in VFX moment, like the hours that go into expanding an explosion into a full, action sequence is quite insane. I mean, I don't know. I think the reality too is we've seen technology take over our jobs before. I think it could be used as a tool, because I really do believe like, so in advertising, when I very first started, I will tell you the deliverable list was usually a 60-second commercial, a 30-second, and a 15. And that was it.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 versions of that. What deliverable list when I left my job 5 years ago was probably something like 7:30s, 16:15s, 25 seconds, and ton of different versions for all the socials. And
So they could run them all, or so they could choose from that many different
they
things?
would run them all, but they'd also need to be versioned for every single medium that you would release it on. So it'd be like network TV, cable TV, YouTube, and then you'd have all the socials. So you'd have all of the different, it'd have to be released in 16, 9, 4, 3, 9, 16, and the audio specs would have to all be done in different levels. And then you'd have to reship it after it wasn't new 6 months later. So think about what your budget's like. So in instances like that, to me, AI is helpful.
Are the budgets going up for things like this?
No.
They're not. So the delivery, you're
No.
asking you for more, but you're not getting paid
Because
more for
it's
it.
digital, it's cheaper.
Doesn't
You're
take
not,
any more
you're
time.
not sending a
Yeah.
film cut.
Yeah.
You're
No, but
sending
that's the misconception about labor, and that's why we've been put in this position, because people thought, okay, things are it's easier because it's all done in your computer and it's not done in a full editing bay anymore. You're not slicing film, but it's hours, it's labor,
Yeah.
it's so much extra content, and the budgets are smaller, the timelines are faster.
They want it yesterday.
Everything's yesterday, and there's so much need for content.
Yeah.
It's like the need is huge.
Everything's growing as we get.
Yeah. So
further,
I do
further
think
ahead.
I this might not be a popular opinion, but I do think like AI and instances like that where you're literally just having unneeded busy work that
Yeah.
people aren't really being that compensated for, that you're really not budgeting for it in the overview of your job.
Yeah.
But in that sense, like, that's the creative side using the tool to then give the
Right.
tool. It's not the agency replacing the creatives by using them.
Exactly.
It's,
But
it's
it's allowing the creatives to get rid of the mundane so that they can focus more on the creativity aspect of it.
That's how I see the
it's the
tools.
tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool
Yeah.
to use.
Everything should be thought of as a tool, not as a
Right.
replacement.
Right.
Unless you're not utilizing the tool, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
not looking to advance yourself and always stay relevant, then yeah, in a way you will be replaced.
Yeah. There's all sorts. This is why we need regulation, because I personally don't think that people's likeness should be taken in an AI format. I also don't think that, the AI writing's kind of, if you've used it, it's
Not the best.
it's not that great. I like to do the more button. Make it more.
Yeah. So at one point you were talking about, you do all this stuff, these crazy different components with LEDs, lights and everything. And you sometimes mention that you may not necessarily be able to be there. So how do you put that together for a client?
Yeah. So I love control systems, and I'm not going to get too deep into it. I love control systems. I love light boards. I love figuring things out and doing unique stuff. So a band, the one that we've done a bunch of music videos for, I was always making things for them, but they could never afford to bring me out on tour because it's expensive. Touring is expensive on its own, and paying for somebody else gets that much more expensive. So one of their tours, I worked with them and we developed a lighting rig and a video rig that they could set up themselves and control themselves. So it wasn't the most complex thing, but it was really cool. So they had DMX lights on the stage and a video projector and a computer, and I set it up with them. It was all controlled through the pedal board. So the guitarist could select new looks, and he had a couple of overrides. Like he could make it strobe and pull back the strobe just to give it a little more interactivity.
Yeah.
And he could instantly dim the lights or turn them off. But it gave him control, it gave the band control, and it gave them a much more dynamic, interesting show. Whereas at that scale of tour, you're just showing up at a club and you talk to the house LD who has never heard your music before and may or may not be stoned out of his mind. And if they're stoned out of the mind, it's usually a hit.
It might be better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually better.
It's a better show.
It's hit or miss. And so giving the band a little bit of control was really helpful for them in building their brand and building their interest among their fans.
So this was in addition to or independent from the actual house boy. Like they could still do lights behind them if they wanted to, but they had this consistent look from show to show.
It gave some consistent look, and it also gave the house LD something to respond to.
Oh, that's
so it's
true,
let the band take the lead. So they're going to pick the color palette. They're going to pick the tempo. And then the house LD can use that visual information to do the full stage.
Nice.
You are two incredible artists that have really looked out for the people. Like, I got to say, really helping them out. How do we find your work together as artists and the light you create and stuff like that as well?
So our side project, our personal hustle, it's Psychedelic Spectacular. So we've got an Instagram at Psychedelic Spectacular and a website and Vimeo, both at the same, psychedelicspectacular.com. Vimeo, I don't know how it's linked, but it's Psychedelic Spectacular.
Yeah, we'll link that stuff.
We have stuff out there.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Simon, Natalie, for just being there for the artists and really
Thanks for having
speaking
us.
Yeah, thank you.
and giving more of what happens behind the scenes in different aspects of the industry. Thank you guys. And thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.
All right.
And then this is where we just keep talking for 5 minutes as there's a jib that pulls out.